Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and this will be the final week of PvP data analysis for Midnight Season 1. We're going to be looking at which are the best specializations moving into the final week for the final push, and kind of just summarizing the meta as a whole, and talking a little bit about where could the meta possibly shift moving into the future, given the colossal amount of changes that are coming in patch 12.1 for Season 2. And as always, if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. So we're going to be starting with the ranged DPS here. We've got their spec representation within the top 5,000 at the moment for Solo Shuffle in North America. And we can see throughout basically this entire season that Frost Mage and Hunter were very dominant throughout this. Frost Mage, especially in the hands of the best players, is incredibly durable, crazy overall damage, very low cooldown defense, rotating between alter time, invisibilities, barriers, and then obviously 2 ice blocks on reasonably low cooldowns, honestly, and just crazy overall damage to the point where they don't necessarily need to win with burst or control. They can win by just outlasting their opponents, which is kind of outside of the domain of what a Frost Mage usually is as far as their gameplay, and this kind of remained true for most of this patch. I think it is still true moving into the final week of the patch, so it's a very strong pick at the moment. Moving into Season 2, they are nerfing PP talents that increase the absorption effects on your barriers. They are also increasing the cooldown of your invisibility effects, particularly your mass invisibility, and they are also reducing the effectiveness of your snares overall. So Frost Mage is receiving some of the most significant nerfs, I want to say, moving into patch 12.1. So this is a bit of a volatile one where you probably want to blast out and have a lot of fun with it right now, because maybe it's not going to be too great. But it is Mage. You know, we know Blizzard's favorite is Mage since the dawn of time here. So we all have to see, but it is getting targeted the most heavily for nerfs. Marksmanship Hunter still remains very dominant here moving to the final week, and I think it's its simplicity is the main reason. You can just press volley, rapid fire, and the target disappears. A lot of other specializations have more complexity to them and more nuance to them, and as far as getting like the momentum that you're able to pull out of Marksmanship Hunter at the moment, it does have some downsides. You know, it can be countered by disarms, but if there are no disarms, you just absolutely rampage in most scenarios. You're very dominant across the board, but its defense was not as strong as Frost Mage, which is why I don't think we saw it as much at tournament level play at the top 0.1%. But for like an average level skill level, you're going to get way better results out of Marksman Hunter than Frost Mage most of the time, I think. So it's just a really good pickup across the game as a whole. Moving into the next patch, at the moment it's still doing insanely high burst damage, even with Explosive Shot being reworked into like a damage over time effect. It still just has really good overall damage. Still, I think it's probably going to be in about the same spot moving from Season 1 into Season 2, and it's getting Scatter Shot back. For Beast Mastery Hunter, very easy specialization to just get effective damage out of and get some really solid results with it. I've seen Big Moran posting that he's been doing 1 button rotation and he got 2600 rating or something now moving into the final week. Beast Mastery Hunter is like the one that I always recommend to anybody who's trying PvP for the first time as a ranged DPS, because it's just so simple, so straightforward, and so effective, all bundled together, and it doesn't have a lot of the stressors that other classes might have as far as dealing with interrupts or dealing with a lot of crowd control. You kind of just smash buttons and your pets eat people's faces. As far as moving into next season, I kind of expect it'll probably still be around the same as far as power and potency. It's pretty effective pre-dampening and post-dampening, so I don't really anticipate too much movement as far as its viability there, but it's just a great pickup if you're a newcomer, even if you're an advanced player. Affliction Warlock definitely rose up the ranks, I think, throughout this season. It started off like almost at the bottom, I think, along with Demonology, but it rose up through the ranks, and now it's competing almost with Mage and Hunter. It's really good in Solo Shuffle, does a lot of damage. I love that it's got some good build diversity as well between Hellcaller and Soul Harvester. Soul Harvester focusing more on Drain Soul, Hellcaller focusing more on AoE. I love that there's a playstyle distinction between those two, depending on what you want to do, even though I'm pretty much the only one playing Hellcaller. I actually think it is still very good. But having that playstyle distinction is very nice. I've been having a lot of fun with it, and it's getting buffed a lot moving to the next patch. So this is the specialization where it's kind of already kind of like fielding its position and could completely overtake moving into 12.1. It's just getting even more damage buffs, is my understanding. It's also a spec that will do really well in kind of a sustained damage meta, and it's it's going to benefit a lot from the stamina changes, because stamina is going up a lot, and a lot of its damage reduction or defense is oriented around its health and how high its stamina is. So Affliction Lock, good pick right now, and also probably a good an initial investment moving into Season 2 as well. Devourer, Demon Hunter, has really good build diversity, just cranks out one-shot pressure with the melee build, with the hunt going in. It does have a little bit of difficulty as far as its combo. I wouldn't say it's as easy as Marksman, where you just press volley rapid fire. With Devourer, you got to weave in vengeful retreat hits at the same time that you're moving in for your Void Slash, so everything can connect and hit all at the same time. And that can be a little difficult initially. Once you figure it out, though, it becomes a bit easier to understand. But you are pretty susceptible to crowd control. Your defense is really good, aside from Marksmanship Hunters and Subtlety Rogues. You have a lot of just self-sustained to be able to survive. I think that moving into the next patch, we will likely see the no collapsing star, no hunt build, where you're just kind of spamming Devour cast with 100 souls, because if the game is slowing down and your team will be able to survive longer, that build will get crazy value as far as overall damage. So I do expect Devour Demon Hunter probably to be about the same moving into the next patch as far as viability, because it will do well, I think, until those damage over time based classes, because it's got the sustain for it. Its damage profile should do still decently well, but you might see some build shifts as far as moving into 12.1. Shadow Priest, honestly, in a pretty healthy position, like top, upper, middle of the pack. Considering that it got pretty stripped this expansion as far as its utility and its crowd control and its lockdown. It's kind of just mostly a damage bot. It doesn't really provide too much support other than flash healing itself when it gets kicked on Shadow to give itself damage reduction. It feels like a lot of its utility is kind of lost. I would have maybe liked to have seen some utility come back, similarly to how we're seeing Scattershot come back for Hunter. Maybe Mass Dispel being more viable as an option. It feels like Mass Dispel is a pretty significantly long cooldown, especially relative to other mechanics like Sanctuary or Reverse Magic, which for the most part are actually easier to use than Mass Dispel. Mass Dispel feels relatively weak. Shadow's just been really good in Shuffle because its overall damage is great. It looks like they're improving its damage profile moving into patch 12.1. And in my opinion, I think Shadow is probably going to still linger around the same position, which is just kind of solid. I don't think it's going to be extremely over the top, but also probably not completely unviable either. Of course, this is all subject to tuning and changes, which is going to be ongoing, and I'll be relaying those patch notes and updates with you in real time. So this isn't just like a set in stone situation, which is why it's really good to hit the subscribe button, so you'll always know what's going in. You'll be in the know in the now. But Shadow Priest is a decent pick, I would say, overall. Destruction Warlock, surprisingly climbing the ranks here. I'm surprised to see this higher than Elemental and Balance Druid. It does a decent amount of damage, but it can be pretty flimsy. I would say its defense is its main withholding factor. But Soulfire does really good damage, and the multiple schools of magic make it a lot easier to get Chaos Bolts. You can use Soulfire to bait kicks, Fear to bait kicks, and then go for Chaos Bolts. Incinerate does do decent damage now. Its overall damage profile is actually very good, but its defense is, I would say, its weak point, and its ability to get effective damage like a Marksmanship Hunter. It can be a lot more prevented due to interrupts and a lot of lockdown as opposed to Marksmanship Hunter, which is why I would say it's tracking much lower here. I don't think it's going to move too much into the next patch, but it did get some pretty big damage buffs. So depending on how those damage buffs go, it could be really good. Maybe with the increases of stamina as well, could help your durability issues. So those two things could push you a little bit higher, but I'm a bit hesitant to rank it too much higher. Depends on if they have actually cut out all the one-shots or not. Destro Lock is a spec that typically wants one-shots because it's probably the most notorious one-shot spec in the game of all time. So I'm a bit hesitant to say as to whether or not it's going to be a really safe pick moving into the next patch, but I think safe to say it'll be close to where it is, maybe a tiny bit higher. Elemental Shaman, I've been really enjoying Tempest. I think that Tempest plays really well into the current meta. Maybe you don't play it necessarily when you're playing with a melee DPS on your team. At least that way, if you're getting attacked, you're going to get locked down. But if you're playing double caster, it's really good. Very strong. Farseer can do well in dampening as well. So I like the build diversity of it at the moment. I think maybe people will start showing some respect for Tempest as I'm trying to make a name for it at the moment, climbing into the rank 1 ranges with it while nobody else is. And everybody's telling me it's terrible. I'm just zapping everybody. I'm helping viewers get their Gladiator titles. Just farming with it despite everybody telling me how terrible it is. So I honestly think Elemental Shaman's got some decent build variety between the two. Farseer's got great defense and self-healing with the Nature's Guardian buffs from the Farseer PP talent. I think Elemental, it's getting pretty significant changes where its cooldowns are getting nerfed, but its damage outside feels a lot better as well, which I think is going to be more fun for the game and healthier for the game. So I would imagine Ellie people will start to recognize it. I think Ellie will start to get recognized, start to climb a bit here, but it's in a solid spot. Boomkin is still tracking pretty low, even though it can do pretty well. I've just swapped back to it after kind of like giving up on it a little bit and just climbed into rank 1 range on it and just smashed up to 3K really fast with it. Obviously, I've been playing it for a very long time. If you don't know how to kite with it effectively, abusing Typhoon, movement speed, keeping regrowth up for healing buffs and movement speed, it can be a bit challenging. There's a little bit more nuance as far as its damage avoidance and the playstyle for it relative to some other specializations, which I think is maybe why its representation isn't as high. And obviously its damage outside of Eclipse or outside of Incarnation is basically non-existent. It's just like dot ticks that don't really matter, that are passively healed back. So if you don't know how to set up those damage windows, ending a match can be difficult. And even with those damage windows, sometimes the damage can be underwhelming. It really just depends on how well you can execute crowd control plus that in tandem with it. Boomkin is getting a lot of attention. It's getting Dispel Protection next patch. If it ends up actually having an AoE build, because at the moment in PvE it looks like it is doing really good AoE. It actually just got nerfed for those reasons. So it kind of depends on how much it's on the radar for Blizzard and how much they are gonna nerf or not nerf it in PvP relative to what they're doing for it in PvE. But if the game slows down, it's obviously going to help the survivability side of this specialization, which I think is why its representation is a bit lower. So it could be doing better next patch. Devastation Evoker, this is one where I kind of agree with you guys now. I've been up talking this the entire season, like, oh my god, this is so cool. Like, this is best spec, easy to play, really effective. I did just get my 4-set bonus on this, which I actually think is very integral. The Azure Sweep, getting 2 charges of it. Azure Sweep is like your main ability. It can hit for over 150k crit. That's the big ability, right? If you're a spec that can have an ability that hits that hard, you're definitely viable. It does struggle with Rogue, and Rogue is very popular. Next patch, it looks like it's kind of dookie tier for PvE, which means it'll probably get Giga buffed. So this is one of those things where it's like a buy low, sell high type of deal. Like, it's on its low, but it's probably going to get the most amount of increases, and depending on their viewpoints for PvP, whether or not they allow those changes to go through will determine whether or not we see it skyrocket or not as far as viability for next season. Fire Mage, limited defense, but next patch amount of Frost Mage durability is going down, but Fire Mage is going up. You're getting double Blazing Barrier, which I think is crazy good. Just Barrier in general has been really powerful since they buffed it by like 25% at the beginning of the season. At the moment, it's tough to land the one-shot. You would really have to connect a Meteor and chain it with an instant Frostfire Bolt, and then if you don't do that, you pretty much can't move health bars, I think is the main issue. So it's really good in like scripted setups where you're coordinated with a Holy Priest or a Subtlety Rogue, and you can pinpoint that exact damage and guarantee that it lands. But then outside of that, Frost Mage just outpaces you by just chucking out Flurry Lance combos and getting Array around the corner. So its burst is a lot more, it requires a lot more precision. Its defense is shaky relative to Frost, which is why I think it's down here, but it's doing okay. It's not amazing, but it's doing okay. Demonology, I'm honestly surprised to not see it a little bit lower than this. It's getting a lot of more buffs though for next season, so hopefully Demonology will actually start to do more meaningful damage because it basically doesn't really feel like it has any pressure. It does have a lot of control though, and it's still very annoying to fight against as far as its control, stuns, coils, and fear. So you want to be an annoying CC bot, it's really good. But damage output has been lacking for most of the season, so you really have to double down onto utility, the Imp Dispel for crowd control, and really focus on utility if you want to succeed with this specialization at the moment. And its defense is maybe not as effective as well. Actually, no, its defense is pretty good actually into melee DPS. I would say against range DPS is where you are going to notice more struggle, but it's actually deceivingly tanky. It may actually be more tanky than Frost Mage into melee, like Warriors and things like that. So something that's kind of underrated on it. I think that's probably what's holding it up and not being down here with Og. And then Arcane Mage, unfortunately, is kind of just at the low end of this. Its defense is definitely the most shaky of Mage. It's not like it was in the War Within where melee could just never touch you. Melee can actually get uptime on you. And the Barrage build with Orb is pretty much the only viable option. Sometimes I've seen the Missile one, but I really don't think it's as competitive. Next season, though, it's getting a lot of tweaks, a lot of adjustments. So this might be, again, one of the specs where you're buying low and could actually end up being really good. Moving into season 2, Augmentation Evoker, I find most frustration with this spec just because of how its kit works in PvP, where you're trying to keep up Ebb and Might, but if you get CC'd for even a millisecond, it falls off and then you're useless, and I really hate that. That main mechanic is just super frustrating to actually try to execute properly in PvP, and that's not being addressed for next season, so I don't really expect Augmentation to make too much movement as far as this representation. Now, when we look at melee DPS, Ret Paladins have taken a clear lead, even despite all the Twitter posts about how they don't do any damage. they do some decent damage still, and the healing is obviously one of the main reasons, and their defensives are still really strong moving into dampening. It's a very well-rounded spec, kind of just bonks around. It's very effective and easy to pull off, and much like Beastmaster Hunter, it's the melee that I recommend to anybody who's just getting into PvP for the first time. But if outside of that, the melee balance is actually pretty close. It's actually very, very, very close between the rest of them. And honestly, I think the melee balance has been the best of the season out of all the roles. Although maybe healer is actually getting pretty close with it. Arms warrior, honestly, I feel like it's pretty weak defensively. Like when I see a warrior, I'm actually usually pretty happy because I think it's a pretty easy target to take down. But it's still this high. I think it's just because its overall damage is in a great position. It's likely going to just stay in about the same position. Ret Paladin did just get nerfed on its healing output, but again, the game in general is slowing down. So it'll probably feel like it's where it is exactly the same where it is right now. Assassination Rogue, surprisingly in the number 3 position now for Shuffle. It's got a crazy one-shot with Deathmark and Kingsbane, but his defense is the shakiest of all the Rogue specs. I think Outlaw Rogue has one of the lowest death rates actually in solo Shuffle, and Assassination is one of the higher ones. It's still up here. So it just goes to show how important it is to be able to do kind of like that big bursty one-shot damage, because Assassination was, I think for the most part, players would consider it the worst rogue spec of the season, but it's actually the highest representation now, at least in Shuffle. Maybe this is more so aimed at tournament gameplay, that comment, but definitely a good spec to go after. Enhancement Shaman, or even next season as well. Assassination Rogue's getting a lot of pain points adjusted. Assassins, this is a good spec I think to invest in for the last week of the season as well as moving into the next one. Enhancement Shaman, really good as well. Multiple builds. You can play Stormbringer for an easier build, and you can play Totemic for more of an advanced build, advanced playstyle. Much like Marksman, really good except for when you get disarmed. A little bit shaky on defense against physical damage. And maybe that's why it's not as represented as Ret Paladin. I think it's the team utility and all the kind of reset cooldowns that they have at the moment that's still propping them a bit higher than the other melee, at least when it comes to Shuffle, but it's a solid pick. Windwalker, they're making it tankier next season. That's its main issue at the moment because everything else about it is great. I think the nerfs to the snares is also going to benefit you significantly, as almost all the melee DPS will benefit from the snare reductions that they are applying. So Windwalker is a good spec as well to invest now moving into the next season. Salty Rogue, very strong right now. Actually just super strong, even though it's only in like the middle of the pack here. Does really well into Demon Hunters, which there are just a lot of, or this list would make you think there isn't a lot of them, but there are definitely a lot of them. Salty Rogue's a really good pick. Moving into next season, I'm not sure, it might shift into Assassination. The DR change particularly, right? So every 20 seconds now you can stun as opposed to every 16. So it gives enemies a 4-second window to continue attacking you before they're worried about what you're going to do as some type of countermeasure. So it's definitely something to take into consideration. It might feel weaker, whereas something like an Assassination Rogue, which is pretty much only going to kidney shot and can't stun as frequently, isn't going to feel the effects of that as much. Havoc Demon Hunter, probably going to be doing really well next season. Very strong pick right now. Really only struggles into Salty Rogue, struggles into Marksmanship Hunter, which obviously we saw there's a lot of. But next season, if it's not getting one shot, it's got a lot of leech healing sustained for dot classes. It could be a really good pick moving from season 1 to season 2, and it's a really good pick right now. So definitely would recommend it. Feral Druid has surprisingly climbed up a lot of ranks here. Even despite its level of complexity and difficulty with snapshotting bleeds. It's still really doing well. I think it's lockdown, it's stuns, it's control. If you've min-maxed the spec, you get a lot of value from it. But if you're a beginner stepping into it for the first time, you might just feel like you're falling over and you're sitting in bear form praying that you don't die. So maybe not the best if you're a beginner player to jump into right away. Unfortunately, it doesn't have kind of like a beginner build like Enhancement Shaman does with Stormbringer to kind of get you in the door, at least on Feral Druid. It's pretty much just advanced out of the at the get-go. And Unholy DK has had a historic fall off. Unholy DK used to be like somewhere up here with the rest of the melee, and it has fallen massively from the very beginning here. I think it's mostly its defense, especially to warriors and BM hunters. Its survivability on Death Knight across the whole seems to be the main issue for it right now. And they did obviously target your cooldowns a lot, and this is the result. In a patch where some specs still have really good cooldown damage and your cooldown damage got nerfed, you're probably going to fall down a few ranks, especially if you don't have something to compensate like Feral Druid or a Rogue with a lot of crowd control, which unfortunately you don't have. Moving into next season, I don't know if it's looking any better for you, honestly, because you're getting targeted a lot for Mythic Plus. So Unholy DK might be a pretty risky one to go after. Survival Hunter is starting to creep up a bit. It's just got a crazy one-shot with Takedown. With Sentinel build, it does crazy damage with the Glaive. Boomstick does crazy damage. not my favorite iteration, most favorite iteration of Survival Hunter at the moment, but it's definitely viable, and it's probably going to be even more viable next season. Still, even next season's build, and probably still not my favorite version of it. But the wildfire spamming, bomb spamming stuff is probably going to be really fun. So Survival Hunter looks like a pretty good one, solid one to pick up between the two. Fury Warrior, I still think does not deserve to be this far down the list. I swear Fury Warrior is almost just as good as Arms, except maybe in melee DPS mirrors. But if you get like a more balanced lobby with some range DPS, it can just run down a lot of these range DPS. So Fury Warrior, although the graph here makes it seem like it's one of the worst options, it's still really good. Frost DK, again, its defense and its limitations to disarm, I think the main reason that it's down here, it kind of just flops over. If it didn't flop over, though, it might be a beast. Next season, I don't think they're really targeting your defense or increasing it at all, unfortunately. And you are a spec that's pretty feast and famine, where you only do damage with your cooldowns, which could be a benefit to you if you're capable of actually closing a match with the cooldown damage that you have. If you can't, though, you'll probably be at a disadvantage. So more of a high-risk pick if you want to pick this one moving to the end of Season 1 into Season 2. Outlaw Rogue, really good control, really good defense. Not the most insane damage is the main issue with this one, and you got to be very precise with its kit as far as getting effective damage out of it relative to pretty much every other melee DPS. So it's fallen off a lot. We saw this one in like the mid-season start to creep up, and it was mostly because its adrenaline rush window was doing a lot of damage. That got nerfed, and then it kind of fell off. It has decent control, but I wouldn't say as much as subtlety. Basically, once you've run out of vanishes, your ability to stun becomes limited to just kidney shot. So your control is a bit lower, which is why its complexity, difficulty to get results from, is why it's likely dropped quite a lot here. And moving into next season, I kind of think it's going to be an assassination rogue go to, at least initially, from what I've seen on the PTR. Now, finally, we've got the healers, which, again, is pretty balanced. There's one outlier. I think it's just Discrease is really fun. It does a lot of damage and it gives you instant Qs, so you can basically like pretend you're a DPS. And it's also just viable, and it's good build variety as well, so you're not just only locked into the Void Weaver. You can also play the Oracle when it's called for. So Discrease is just a really well-rounded, fun healer. Whenever it's strong, it's very popular. It's just really well-designed. And it's just a really popular design. Mistweaver is still holding in a good position, even despite the nerfs to the spinning crane kick build. And what's interesting is I anticipated that Unholy DK would be doing better because Mistweavers couldn't just spin them, but Unholy DK is actually falling off, even despite the fact that one of its main counters got addressed. But Mistweaver is just really good into hunters. It can port while stunned and avoid freezing traps. It's probably one of the most difficult healers to actually trap, which is, I think, his main advantage, given how popular Hunter is at the moment. Restoration Druid, really good throughput. It's strong in shuffle because people just tunnel one target. They'll just call a target at the start of the game and only attack that, never switch, which is, you're basically immune to death in that type of situation. That's kind of and that's just unfortunately the default strategy of shuffle. It's a bit harder to coordinate on the fly, right? To switch targets with no voice, so people you might have never played with before, or comps that you've never played. So it benefits a lot from that. And it's got a lot of good, decent damage output and really good stuns as well when you're able to get away with it. Holy Paladin's just healthy position, just solid, well-rounded. It's one of the best healers I recommend for beginners, just because it's got a lot of immunities and great just initial throughput, so it can just bubble wings and top people instantly without a lot of like complex rotations as far as applying hots preemptively before you do it. It's just press big heal, go. And you're able to keep your teammates alive. Restoration Shaman is starting to climb up through the ranks a lot here. With the Riptide buffs, it feels a lot more viable than it has pretty much the entire season. So moving to this final week, definitely a good pickup to switch to. Moving to next season, it could be better as well, depending on if Shadow Priests or Warlocks pick up over Mages, if they do. Because right now, honestly, Restoration Shaman is pretty weak when Mage and Hunter are the best, because it doesn't synergize well with them. It's got DRs overlapping with it. It's tough to heal those specs because they're constantly moving around. It can be difficult to excel there, but if Shadow Priests and Warlocks are good, you do really well with those specs and against those specs. So Shaman is likely a pretty good investment, I would say, at the moment, moving at the end of this season into the next. Preservation Evoker falling off a bit, at least when it comes to shuffle. It's still an amazing flag carrier, best healer in Battlegrounds for sure, by far. But as far as shuffle, things are evening out. You've fallen down quite a lot from where things started. Moving to next season might be a healer to avoid, given everything that's happening to all the attention on it, and then it's not going to benefit from the changes, I think, too much relative to other healers and other comp synergies. Holy Priest, it's holding on. I think its main issue at the moment is that all of its cooldowns, all of its throughput is based around just healing. And most shuffle matches go into deep dampening, like 60 to 80% healing reduction. So that's reducing basically your entire kit. Other classes have other tools that are, maybe unmitigated by dampening, whereas your entire class is mitigated by dampening. I think that's the main issue that I've encountered with its viability, but it is a lot better than it was. You can definitely still make it work, but matches that kind of stalemate towards the mid higher levels of the ladder, you kind of just feel like you lose in the late game because you and your healing just kind of stops healing at that point. It is getting some buffs, I would say. Like Holy Paladin is upticking a lot for next season, Resto Druid as well. The meta could be really good for Shaman. Shaman's kind of upticking as well. So healer balance is a little bit tougher to call as far as what's going to be the most viable for next season. But overall, the game has gotten into a lot better of a position, I would say, moving into these final weeks of the season. So hopefully when the PTR ends and we're jumping into season 2, they're able to clamor on here and get it as good as it is right now, or as close to as good as it is right now, or if not better, as fast as possible, moving into season 2, because I'm having a lot of fun with it. So I'm hoping to have a lot of fun with season 2 and everything that's going on with that. So thank you guys very much for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown and this discussion, and I will see you in the next one.